Hey y'all, welcome and welcome back to my channel. My name is Natea and this is Nesthetics, where I talk about topics that I care about and you should care about too if you choose. Today I wanted to do a quick video talking about black capitalism and the whole thing that happened with Jay-Z on Twitter a couple weeks ago. So if you haven't heard already, some weeks ago, I think at the end of August actually, Jay-Z made some comments about capitalism and how capitalism is a slur against black people, like the N-word and like the word monkey. I am not on Twitter, so I did not see this on Twitter. I ended up seeing it on Instagram through this Instagram page called The Darkest Hue, which is a wonderful Instagram page you should definitely follow and support. So I'm going to read some of the slides from the Darkest Hue's Instagram page and the post that they made about Jay-Z and capitalism, just so for people who do not know what's up and what we're talking about, give you a little bit of a refresher. So the post is titled Dinner with Jay-Z, a lesson in fictive kinship. Jay-Z compares being called a capitalist to the N-word and other slurs. So Jay-Z said on Twitter Spaces, "We not falling for the trick before it was the American dream, but when we start getting it, they try to lock us out of it. They start inventing words like capitalist. We've been called the N-word and monkeys. They got to come up with stronger words. We not going to stop. You're not going to make us feel ashamed to be successful." And you can go on the Darkest Hue's Instagram to finish looking at the post, but I just wanted to read what Jay-Z said in Twitter Spaces. So I found it weird that Jay-Z was saying like, oh, people are trying to use the word capitalist against black people as a slur, but black people are the ones that are calling other black capitalists. It's not white people using it against black people. It's majority black people who are calling out black capitalists and calling out black capitalism, because some people in the black community believe that black capitalism is going to save our community and being self-sufficient, owning our own businesses. That's what's going to lead us to prosperity, black autonomy. But in reality, that's not true. This conversation kind of reminds me of W.E.B. Du Bois' argument about the talented 10th and how like the 10% of black people with higher education, they are going to be the ones that lead the black community into prosperity. But in theory, that sounds like it would work, but in practice, it does not. As I've stated in a previous video, the more black people we have with higher degrees, higher education, PhDs, master's degrees, that does not do anything to economically improve the black community as a whole. And similarly with Jay-Z, I feel like he's trying to say that, you know, the more black millionaires and billionaires we have, the more black successful people that we have, the more the black community is going to thrive. And as what was stated in the rest of the Darkest Hue's Instagram post, Jay-Z thinks that like his wealth and like other black capitalists' wealth will trickle down to the rest of the black community. Because they are successful, then that means that the rest of the black community is successful, when that is not true. Understandably, money is powerful and it rules many things around us. So it makes sense that Jay-Z would think that, oh, the more black billionaires, millionaires, successful people that we have, the more prosperous the black community as a whole will be. I think it's wonderful that black people today are able to reach positions of power or just in positions of success, celebrity status, etc. Today, whereas 50 years ago, that would have been a different conversation. So I do believe, of course, progress is being made, but at the end of the day, just because black people are more prosperous, we had a biracial president. A lot of people were like, yes, Barack Obama is the first black president, but in reality, he was biracial. So we had a president who was half black, and we have black billionaires and black millionaires, but in reality, that has not changed the circumstances for the black community as a whole when it comes to incarceration rates, when it comes to homicides, when it comes to our communities and resources and etc. those things have not changed as a result of Black people being in power and politics and Black people being celebrities or reaching millionaire and billionaire statuses. I think the whole conversation about Black capitalism is really interesting to me because this is something that I am studying as a master's in urban studies student. My thesis is going to be on Black autonomy, looking at how Black people between 1920 and 1960 practiced autonomy in certain spaces by building their own businesses and just doing things like that to be self-sufficient. And it's interesting because it seems like Black capitalism is something that would be more helpful for us, but it's really not. And I believe, after doing some research, and I'm still doing research since this is my thesis, that Black capitalism, one reason it doesn't work outside of it being a system that wasn't built to support Black people, and it's always been a system where white people have always benefited more than Black people. Outside of that argument, Black capitalism doesn't work because psychologically Black people are programmed to just believe in white supremacy. And what I mean by that is that when I was researching Black towns, and if you don't know what Black towns are spaces that Black people created for themselves, or they create for themselves, but they were mostly created by newly freed, enslaved Black people. So let's say like late 19th century, like 1900s was when a lot of Black towns became to be, and the most Black towns are in the state of Oklahoma, but there are Black towns that exist or existed all across the US. So in a book called The Black Towns that I read or that I am reading and that I've read so that I can do my thesis, I read how, like, in one Black town in particular, even though Black people, this whole town was at least 90% Black people were having all the businesses in the town were Black owned and operated. You know, they had Black banks, they had Black farms, they had Black everything. Everything was Black in this town. But social stratification still existed. There were still different social classes of Black people. Black people weren't practicing socialism or, you know, equally sharing the wealth in a Black town, even though many of them had just came out of slavery. You would think that Black people would be like, oh, maybe we shouldn't adapt this capitalist ideology, and maybe we should come together, especially since we're all newly freed people and we're trying to make it, and we're building this Black town for ourselves so we can be self-sufficient. But no, in some Black towns it was not like that. As of right now, I do not know any Black towns who were not capitalist. I believe they were all capitalist. So there was still social stratification where there was the classes, the lower, middle, upper class Black people. Then there was also colorism. There were instances that I read where light-skinned Black people would build their own organizations and churches and leave dark-skinned Black people out of it. And even vice versa, I read about how dark-skinned people, they did not like light-skinned people and they would call them names and things like that. The whole stories that we hear about colorism, but that still existed even though it was an all-Black town. And then another thing that struck me was that the Black people who were like in the upper class, they were aspiring to be like white people. Like, they had enough money so they would build houses that were similar in appearance to like the plantations that houses that their former white slave owners had. So the Black people in these Black towns, the ones that were in the upper class and had the money to afford to have a big house, they decided to build their house like the former white plantation owners that they knew. And also within like newspapers in Black towns, they would still advertise like skin lightening cream. They would advertise perms and like hair straightening products. So even outside of Black capitalism in general, psychologically, Black people, I do not believe, can be self-sufficient and just own their own businesses, be on their own, and thrive, because white supremacy is still going to prevail, because psychologically we have been programmed generationally to believe that what we've seen in white communities and what white people have done, that's what we have to follow. I do think it's amazing that more Black people are owning their own businesses and organizations. However, I think that only impacts that individual family. Like, if I have a business and I generate generational wealth, that is my individual family's generational wealth. That generational wealth does not trickle down to the rest of the Black community. So when people talk about how like more Black people should have LLCs and businesses and things like that, that helps those individual family lines. That does not help the rest of the Black community. I also think it's interesting how when Black people build businesses, we have to think about our community. We have to think about the Black community, because when white people build businesses, I'm sure they're not thinking about, oh, how can this business further help my community? But it's like everything that Black people do, it seems like we always have to think about, how is that going to impact our community? How is this business going to help our community? I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think it's interesting that Black people, many of us feel like we have a moral responsibility to help the Black community, just because we all are Black and we all understand and know like struggles of the Black community. So when Black people build businesses, it's like, or when Black people become millionaires or billionaires, it seems like they feel like, or the Black community feels like they have a moral responsibility to give back to the larger Black community. And that's even the same with like individual families. So I've seen statistics about how it's hard for individual families to gain generational wealth, because let's say that I'm the person that makes it out, who goes to college, whereas my parents, they weren't able to ever make it out of poverty or something like that. And my family, they expect me to use what I'm earning now as a college degreed Black person to use my money to help them. And that's similar, like when you hear rappers and songs, they be like, you know, I bought my mom a house, I bought my mom a car. Like, Black people have always, it seems like, had the moral responsibility to give back either to their individual families when they gain wealth, or to the larger Black community as a whole. And I think that's interesting how the Black community specifically, like we, and not the white community, does not have to think about that. They don't have to think about, how am I going to help the larger white community with my business. So I found a statistic from this organization named Development. They had this post. Development is a nonprofit organization that helps Black visionaries and helps to empower Black visionaries. And I did an internship with them about 2 years ago. They had this post where they posted this statistic, and it says 80% of Black parents expect to be supported by their children. A main reason why Blacks are unable to save as adults is because they give financial support to close family. So that just goes to further support my point that Black people, whether individually within your family or as a celebrity, you are expected to give back when you make it. So it's like anybody who makes it within the Black community, whether that's in your individual family or your Jay-Z, when you make it, it's like you're expected to give back. And I think that for me, like, because I empathize with like Black struggles and like the Black community and what we've been through in our history and stuff like that, I feel like I do have a moral responsibility to give back in some way. But everybody does not feel that way. Every Black person in the community does not feel that way. And I feel like we can't judge Black people for not wanting to give back. So in conclusion, it's hard for me to have conversations like this because capitalism is such a topic where it's like, it's not a solution-based conversation usually. I like to have solution-based conversations where at the end we're talking about a problem, and then in the end, we're talking about a solution. And for me, I haven't read enough about different systems, capitalism, socialism, communism, to be able to be like, oh, I think socialism is a better system that will work and give us more equality. But from what I've heard from other people, there's even inequality within socialism. And I don't think there's a perfect system that would work, that would give Black people, Black communities, the equity and equality that we need. So I just want to leave this conversation off with a few questions that I thought of, since I can't think of solutions right now, or this is not a solution-based conversation, just me talking about my thoughts on the topic. I wanted to share some questions, and I wanted to leave you all with some questions to think about. The first question is, what does redistributing wealth look like where it positively impacts the Black community economically as a whole? If Black billionaires and millionaires wanted to truly invest in Black communities, what would redistributing their money look like? Because a lot of people say, like, Black people or Black millionaires and billionaires should redistribute their money, and it's not really trickling down. But we do see a lot of these Black millionaires and billionaires, like, giving back to HBCUs or giving back to nonprofit organizations, but those things really don't even trickle down. And even with, like, the Black Lives Matter organization, how so much money during the George Floyd situation in 2020 went to them, but we did not see any changes within our community. So how can money be redistributed in a way where it economically makes a positive impact on Black communities as a whole? I'm really curious to know, like, how would that work? Because it seems like even though Black millionaires and billionaires are giving back, it's not doing anything to change statistics. The second question is, do you think Black people should have the moral responsibility to give back to their communities if they make it out of poverty or are millionaires and billionaires? So Jay-Z has talked about his upbringing and how he came from living with so many people within the household. And a lot of Black people who are millionaires and billionaires, yeah, they were able to make it out of poverty, and they were able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps or whatever, work hard and get to where they are today. But in reality, every Black person does not have that story. Every Black person who comes from a generation of poverty does not make it out of poverty. So it's still unfair to say that Black people should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, because everyone does not make it out, unfortunately. So this goes back to the question, do Black people, do you think they should have the moral responsibility to give back to the Black community if they make it out of poverty? Because like I was saying earlier, no other community, it doesn't seem like they have that moral responsibility where they feel like they have to give back if they start a Black business, or they feel like they have to give back if they are a billionaire or millionaire. So do you think that we as Black people should have the moral responsibility to give back? And my last question is, by looking at Black millionaires and billionaires as people who should help the Black community prosper economically, are we taking power away from the Black people who aren't millionaires and billionaires living in Black communities? So I feel like a lot of people look to Black millionaires and billionaires, like I was saying, to give back, to extend their wealth to the people who aren't, the Black communities who aren't doing so well. But in reality, the Black people within communities who aren't celebrities, who are just regular people, they do too still have power. And I've taken like a community organizing class, and I've learned how people in general, communities in general, they have worked together, no matter if they were even homeless, have worked together to create change, and that they have the power to create change within their communities together. And I think that a lot of times we look to people above to help Black communities, but in reality, the people within Black communities, they have power too. They have power to create change. So that question is just like, are we taking away the power from Black people in communities by saying that millionaires and billionaires are the ones that should be helping to help the Black community economically prosper? So those were all my questions, and those were all of my thoughts on this whole topic. I feel like I kind of took a different perspective on this topic in Black capitalism and talking about Black towns, since that is my area of research in school. But let me know your thoughts about my thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see y'all in my next video. Bye.